This is NTD Evening News. Live from our NTD Global Headquarters in New York City, here is Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. New details on the occupation of Columbia University's historic Hamilton Hall. The NYPD was called in by administration leaders to arrest pro-Palestinian agitators last night. A similar scene unfolded at the City College of New York. NTD's Fiona G reports.
Approximately 300 people were arrested at Columbia and City College. We are processing the arrests to distinguish between who were actual students and who were not supposed to be on the ground. These external actors with a history of escalating situations and trying to create chaos, not to peacefully protest, but create chaos.
The NYPD released a video of a professional protest consultant who was reportedly seen instructing protesters outside Hamilton Hall. Occupying students made human chains, destroyed security cameras, and took steps to avoid arrest. Police say these tactics clearly point to outside influence. They warn the methods can spread to anti-Israel encampments at other schools. In a letter to the NYPD, the president of Columbia University asked for police to stay on campus until at least May 17th. The encampment has now been cleared from the lawn of the university. Students arrested now face expulsion from the school and criminal charges. At City College, protesters lit flares and clashed with police. After clearing out agitators, the NYPD removed a Palestinian flag from the campus flagpole and raised the American flag. College authorities stated that calling the NYPD was a response to repeated acts of vandalism and violence and not a crackdown on peaceful protest. Violence continues on college campuses. Nationwide, over 1,000 protesters have been arrested. Fiona G., NTD News.
Violence also erupting at UCLA as clashes between pro-Palestinian protesters and Israel supporters escalate. NTD's Christina Corona brings us the latest from Los Angeles.
The violence broke out around 11 p.m. on Tuesday into Wednesday morning when approximately 50 counter-protesters dressed in dark clothing with hoods and white masks stormed the barricade, attempting to dismantle it. Footage shows the two groups striking each other with bats and wooden objects.
One of my friends has a massive bump on the back of his head. He just got whacked when he was up here. I mean, they were coming up here and just like violently attacking us.
Unarmed security guards had to retreat as fireworks were fired at the encampment, exploding close to the tents at Royce Quad.
We had people mazing us, beating us with bats and sticks, throwing whatever they could to us, and none of this law enforcement was here at all.
One student says law enforcement was slow to respond.
It's kind of foolish that law enforcement didn't decide to step in when people were being beaten with metal bats, maced, yelling very threatening things.
UCLA officials requested the LAPD to intervene on campus during the early hours of Wednesday to restore order and ensure public safety.
It's crazy right now. There's a lot of police out here. A lot of cars right now, so this is crazy.
The situation seemed to have calmed down in the hours following the police arrival. No arrests were made. The Jewish Federation of Los Angeles said in a statement, "The abhorrent actions of a few counter-protesters last night do not represent the Jewish community or our values. We believe in peaceful civic discourse. Unfortunately, the violence at UCLA is a result of the lack of leadership from the chancellor and the UCLA administration. However, the violence prompted the university to cancel all classes on Wednesday. Governor Gavin Newsom addressed the violence on X, stating, "The right to free speech does not extend to inciting violence, vandalism, or lawlessness on campus." Officials also declared that Royce Hall will remain closed until Friday, and Powell Library will not reopen until Monday. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with officials in Israel for high-stakes discussions on the war in the Gaza Strip. And while he was there, protesters called for the U.S. to pressure Israel and Hamas to reach a ceasefire deal. NTD's Jason Perry has the latest.
Wednesday, families of hostages held in the Gaza Strip were in the streets of Tel Aviv, while Secretary of State Antony Blinken was meeting with officials in Israel. This man's father has been held hostage in the Gaza Strip since October 7th, and he had this message for President Biden.
And we're asking him to apply whatever pressure is necessary to Hamas, but not only to Hamas, also to the Israeli Prime Minister.
And Blinken met with Israel's Prime Minister during his trip, as well as Israel's president.
We yearn for the immediate return of the hostages. It is and should be the top priority of the international community.
We're determined to get a ceasefire that brings the hostages home and to get it now. And the only reason that wouldn't be achieved is because of Hamas. We also have to be focused on people in Gaza who are suffering in this crossfire Hamas is making. And so focused on getting them the assistance they need.
Blinken also met with family members of hostages while he was in Israel before he departed on Wednesday. This man had this to say after meeting with Blinken.
He was very fair, I must tell. He told us all the problems that they have as United States. And he spoke with everybody, each, and it was fantastic.
Meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, Israel reported striking several terror targets belonging to Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. And some residents in the Gaza Strip are not sure where to go to find safety, including this man who said he survived an apparent Israeli airstrike.
They asked us to go to Al Shabura, and we came to Al Shabura. What is our fault? Do you see this ceiling? It was made out of cement. Then I would have lost all my children. What can we do? Where will we go? I'm waiting to get my tent to leave. I'm waiting for it so I can leave.
And also on Wednesday, for the first time since the war began, Israel opened up the Erez crossing to allow the delivery of humanitarian aid to the northern Gaza Strip. Jason Perry, NTD News.
The Arizona State Senate today voting to repeal an 1864 abortion ban previously upheld by the state's highest court. The legislation restricts abortions in most cases, except when the mother's life is in danger. It took 16 votes in the GOP-led chamber to overturn the ban. A total of 14 Democrats, along with 2 Republicans, voted to repeal it. Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs is expected to sign the measure into law. Going forward, the bill could pave the way for Arizona to go back to a 15-week abortion ban, but getting there could take a while. That's because the repeal won't go into effect until 90 days after the end of legislative session. Meanwhile, in Florida, a ban on abortion after 6 weeks took effect today. Former President Trump campaigning in key battleground states today, taking advantage of a full day off from his criminal trial in New York. NTD's Jack Bradley has more from Freeland, Michigan.
I'm here in Freeland, Michigan, where former President Trump is holding a rally right after he held one earlier today in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Both of these states are key battleground states in this election. And both of these states, Trump lost to Biden in 2020. Michigan, he lost by less than 3 percentage points. In Wisconsin, he lost by less than 1%. However, a poll by the Harvard Caps Harris poll this week puts Trump ahead of Biden. 48% of the participants said they would back Trump, 43% for Biden, and 9% said that they were unsure. Earlier, I spoke with Epoch Times reporter on this campaign, Lawrence Wilson, to hear his thoughts about it.
These are close races. They're both states with a lot of electoral votes, and so both candidates are vying hard for them. And President Trump is here today to bring his message about the economy, and particularly hammer, I think, the current president on his job with inflation, because both these states have been pretty hard hit with inflation.
President Trump is expected to bring up the inflation under the Biden administration, as well as the record-breaking surge in illegal immigration, as well as the hush money case that's now entering its 3rd week. Now, Trump has to appear at every one of these trials, or else he faces the possibility of arrest. Yesterday, he was just fined $9,000 by the judge, saying he violated a gag order related to the case. This case stems from his former lawyer paying an adult film store, Stormy Daniels, back in 2016 not to go public, and Trump is accused of falsifying business records related to this case, all of which Trump has repeatedly denied these allegations. While this is happening, President Biden is holding a press conference in Waukesha in support of abortion and abortion rights and those granted under Roe v. Wade. Reporting from Freeland, Michigan, Jack Bradley, NTD News.
And what can we expect if Trump wins a second term? In an interview with Time magazine, the presumptive GOP nominee outlined his vision for the future of America. According to the interview, Trump's agenda includes deporting millions of illegal immigrants, gutting the federal bureaucracy, pardoning January 6th defendants, and more. On the issue of abortion, the former president said it's up to the states to decide, not the federal government. Trump also vowed to protect Israel, but remains critical of a two-state solution to resolve the conflict with Palestinians. Speaking about Ukraine, Trump said he would try to help the war-torn nation, but he added that other NATO members also needed to pay their fair share. And the House today passed a bill that would establish a broader definition of anti-Semitism for the Department of Education. The proposal, which passed with bipartisan support, would codify the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism in a federal anti-discrimination law. It now goes to the Senate for a vote. House Democrat leaders say they have Speaker Mike Johnson's back if his GOP colleagues try to remove him as Speaker. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene says she'll move forward with the attempt to oust him. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has more on Johnson's support from Democrats and some reactions.
What the country needs right now is a functioning Congress.
House Speaker Mike Johnson said Tuesday it was the first he'd heard of Democratic leaders signaling they would help him keep his job.
You know, you hope you have the support of everyone, the entire country. But you know, like I said, I've got to do my job and continue to keep my head down. This is a very serious time for the country. We're not playing games here. The world is on fire.
Johnson has come under fire from some Republicans for his role in passing the $95 billion emergency spending bill this month. He says it's no time to be playing politics and engaging in chaos.
We need to be doing the job that the framers intended for Congress to play, and that's what I'm about. I'll continue to pursue that every day, and you know, we'll keep the wheels of government functioning.
A small number of GOP members could oust Johnson as Speaker if Democrats voted with them. Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and other Democratic leaders say after finishing work on the National Security Supplemental, they won't just let that happen.
None of the discussion that we had in caucus was about saving Mike Johnson. The underlying motion to vacate was not discussed. The motion to table was.
House Democratic Caucus Chair Pete Aguilar says leaders are not asking anyone to take a position opposed to their values.
Each member is going to vote their district and their conscience, guided by the Constitution.
Congressman Aguilar says many are leaning to set aside any move by Green to take away Johnson's gavel.
We want to turn the page. We don't want to turn the clock back and let Marjorie Taylor Greene dictate the schedule and the calendar of what's ahead.
Congresswoman Greene filed a motion to vacate with the House clerk last month. The resolution would remove Johnson if approved by the House. The Congresswoman on X saying Johnson should resign and switch parties. Greene wrote she wants transparency and Congress to go on the record to show where they stand.
Mike Johnson is not capable of that job. He has proven it over and over again.
Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Federal Reserve announced no move in interest rates at its Wednesday meeting. That keeps the central bank's rate where it's been since last July at a 23-year high. The problem is inflation has been stubborn despite high rates. The Fed doesn't want to lower rates until it's sure inflation is firmly under control. Fed Chair Jerome Powell says the high interest rate is working, but we aren't there yet. Just 6 weeks ago, the Fed indicated it was planning 3 rate cuts this year. That's in doubt now, though it's still unlikely the bank will raise rates in the near future. Unitedhealth's CEO testified before Congress today. That's over what many consider the biggest healthcare cyber attack in American history. Lawmakers grilled him on how the company is fixing the situation. NTD's Arlen Richards has more.
Mr. Witte owes Americans an explanation.
The CEO of Unitedhealth Group, Andrew Whitty, grilled over the biggest healthcare hack in American history Wednesday. Hackers stole personal medical data from Unitedhealth subsidiary Change Healthcare. Change Healthcare processes billing and insurance for almost 6,000 hospitals and health systems. The hack forced Whitty to shut down the entire system. This is putting financial pressure on such hospitals.
One health center reports spending $12,000 every week on overtime for staff who are dealing with the billing and eligibility issues.
Representative Catherine Masto says missing just 2 payments could shut down some of them. Some have stopped treating patients who likely had their personal data stolen.
Sensitive diagnoses, treatments, and medical histories that reveal everything from abortion to mental health disorders to diagnosis of cancer to sexually transmitted infections.
Senator Ron Wyden says we don't even know for sure exactly what was stolen, and we may never know, all because the company didn't have multi-factor authentication on any of its servers, nor did it duplicate critical components in its system called redundancy.
This company flunked both.
Andrew Whitty says he's trying to make it up to health providers by giving them interest-free loans.
I'm deeply, deeply sorry. We will provide this assistance for as long as it takes to get providers' claims and payments flowing at pre-incident levels.
Whitty says these loans have no conditions except that health providers must pay it back 45 days after they return to normal. The Change Healthcare hack was discovered early February. Whitty says he paid the hackers $22 million in ransom money and only got the stolen data back a month ago. He hopes health providers will be made whole in the next month. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
People across the world today may be taking part inadvertently in one of the world's greatest atrocities, the theft of organs from living prisoners of conscience in China. But not if you live in Texas or Utah. A new law in Utah puts a stop to health insurance providers covering or providing post-care for organ transplant surgery in China and any other country where forced organ harvesting is believed to occur. That's because transplant tourism continues today, with people traveling for procedures that could save their lives and yet end others. Earlier, we spoke with Dr. Torsten Trey, founder and executive director of Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting, to find out more about this horrific phenomenon. Dr. Torsten Trey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, a new law goes into effect in Utah today that stops health insurance companies from paying for organ transplants in countries like China. Why does the law specifically single out China?
This law is very specific because it acknowledges that there are crimes against humanity and that forced organ harvesting is a form of crimes against humanity. And this is not acceptable. And so far, the information we have is that this practice is practiced in China. So this law is very specific in pointing out the source where this crime happens.
Now, this law is a Utah law. It's this one state, but why is it so significant?
It is significant as it is the law passed unanimously in both chambers, and the law is also significant in this sense that it is a very simple law and could actually pass within a few weeks. So it sets the standard for other states. Other states could follow the steps of Utah and simply pass a similar law.
Speaking about that, Arizona also quickly passed a similar law just this year. However, last month, Governor Katie Hobbs vetoed the bill. On the same day, in fact, the Idaho governor signed a similar bill into law. Looking at the federal level, are there similar bills at the federal level that are facing obstacles in Congress?
Yes, there are. There's a bill introduced in the House. It is the Bill 4132, and this bill is a little bit different. It addresses the victims. It wants to protect the victims of this forced organ harvesting. It passed the Foreign Affairs Committee last summer, and it is now basically parked in the next committee, that's the Judiciary Committee. And we are now waiting to that this bill can pass and then go to the floor. So this is quite important because we see that not only in Arizona but also on the federal level there might be steps that slow down the passing of these laws. Although they are completely non-partisan, they are about human rights. They are in the sense they want to protect doctors and patients from becoming complicit in this crime against humanity. So it is utterly important that we pass these laws.
Reports are saying that this is happening nationwide across China. In your view, what else should be done to combat forced organ harvesting and make sure that Americans don't unknowingly participate in it?
Yeah, it is very important that we start talking about it. We face different forms of censorship, even in the media, even here in this country, and we need more media to talk about it. Nobody should be a victim of forced organ harvesting, but also nobody should remain silent to talk about it. Yeah, we need to talk about it. We need to give the victims a voice and stop it. This is also a reflection of who we are as human beings.
And Dr. Trey, just the last question here. Your organization has been working to raise awareness and combat forced organ harvesting for nearly 2 decades. With so much more to be done, what is your hope with all of this?
Well, we hope that more doctors, actually medical doctors, learn about this atrocity. This is an transplant abuse in the medical field, and it is the duty of medical professionals, of doctors, to come forth. Recently, we applied, for example, for a booth at the American Transplant Congress that takes place in Philadelphia from June 1st to the 5th. And we applied for a booth in the exhibition hall, but our application was rejected, and I don't understand why it happened. We were not given a reason, but what is even more important is it is a lost opportunity for all the attendees to come to our booth to learn about forced organ harvesting and to come to their own conclusion. We need to break through this kind of censorship. This is an atrocity that is taking place globally, or it should affect the international community. It is happening in China, but China is starting to approach other countries for exchange in the transplant field, and we cannot allow this to happen. So we need to engage more medical doctors to learn about it and to speak up.
Dr. Torsten Trey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Joining me now to discuss external actors and the funding behind the anti-Israel protests is retired Colonel Grant Newsham. He is a senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy and the author of When China Attacks. Grant, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you again. Now, House lawmakers last week sent a letter to the IRS calling on the agency to investigate U.S.-based nonprofit groups with financial links to China. The letter, obtained by the Free Beacon, singles out the People's Forum, a group that helped organize anti-Israel walkouts in New York City public schools, as well as other anti-Israel protests. What do we know about this group and its alleged links to the Chinese regime?
Well, the People's Forum is funded by a tech entrepreneur who made a ton of money, a fellow named Neville Roy Singham. And his ties to Marxism, his affection with it goes back really to his young days. And he spends a lot of time in Shanghai, has close ties with at least some propaganda news outlets, the PRC. He's got a close connection with Code Pink via his wife. And Code Pink has put on events saying that nothing bad is happening to the Uyghurs, no genocide. China's done absolutely nothing wrong. And you have this sort of background, this sort of connection. And he has, I believe, expressed his own admiration for Maoism. So he personally has some pretty deep ties emotionally, and ideologically, and physically with the People's Republic of China. So that gives you some idea of what's going on there.
Well, looking beyond the People's Forum, what do we know about CCP-linked funding to groups that oppose Israel and America and promotes Marxist causes?
Well, one which comes immediately to mind is Black Lives Matter, that caused so much trouble a few years ago and has come out very pro-Hamas, very anti-Israel. In fact, the co-founder of it said around 2017 she thought Israel should be destroyed. What you will find with BLM, if you look at where their funding has come from, the board of directors, assistant chairman of the board of directors of one of the foundations that provides fiscal and financial support, has ties to the PRC, to the Chinese Communist Party, going back to the late 60s, early 70s. That gives you a pretty good sort of prima facie case. And there's been other people who've pointed out the connections between BLM and the Chinese Communist Party as well. But by definition, any front group or organization that takes the Chinese line, they are anti-America. Even if they haven't spoken out about the Gaza war, the China-U.S. Exchange Foundation is one good example of that, Hong Kong-based, funded by the PRC, and they have put a lot of money into U.S. think tanks, universities. Even the George H.W. Bush Foundation reportedly got $5 million. They put on the Sanya event in China, where they invite retired U.S. military officers, senior ones, for a few days of fun in the sun and being influenced by the PRC. So the Chinese are active. This is one of their three warfares. It's public opinion warfare, partly psychological warfare as well.
Expanding on that last part, why is it in the Chinese Communist Party's interest to fund causes like these? Why are they doing that?
Oh, anything that causes chaos in China's enemies is good. It causes them to be distracted, of course, from things closer to China, say Taiwan, for example, but it also is a drain on resources. We are emptying out our arsenals, supplying Ukraine, supplying Gaza as well, and that's just less hardware, less ammunition you have if you have to fight against the Chinese. It creates some sort of political sort of constraints on what the Americans can do as well, because the administration, it's obviously has had to modify and weaken what it would do to support Israel for fear of getting the pro-Hamas voting bloc in the United States angry. So anything that, as I say, causes chaos in your enemy is a good thing. And Xi Jinping has actually said this. He said it, for example, with his friend Putin not too long ago when they were visiting. They said something like, things are happening now that haven't happened for 100 years, and we're driving it. And he's made other references to chaos. More recently, the Chinese spy chief put an article into the CCP's main journal saying that there's a lot of chaos going on. Let's take advantage of it. So they like what they see when their enemies are at each other's throats.
Speaking of chaos, TikTok, which has extensive ties to the CCP, has been accused of boosting anti-Israel content amid the war. Now, we do know that students make up the majority of TikTok users in the U.S. Could the Chinese regime be using TikTok to promote and stoke these anti-Israel protests, especially those on college campuses?
Well, they could, and I would say they would be pretty dumb if they weren't doing it. And if you just look at what is on TikTok, if that's where you're getting your news, you're going to think, oh, the poor Palestinians are oppressed, the Israelis are the second coming of the Nazis. That's the impression you would get, and that's what opinion polls seem to suggest whenever they talk to college students. And it has been a successful method by the Chinese, and anytime you can broadcast your message 24/7 into the target audience, and that's all they hear, you're going to have a pretty good outcome if you're the people doing the broadcasting.
Quite concerning indeed. Grant Newsham, retired colonel, senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy, and author of When China Attacks. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Gain-of-function research back in the spotlight. House lawmakers question the president of Ecohealth Alliance today. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more.
Congressmen on the House Oversight Select Subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic, both Republicans and Democrats, grilled Dr. Peter Daszak on alleged discrepancies that they found on the Ecohealth Alliance president's testimony from November of 2023.
We will hear from both sides that there are serious concerns regarding Ecohealth Alliance's failure to comply with reporting requirements for federal grantees. Concerns that draw into questions whether you, Dr. Daszak, sought to deliberately mislead regulators at NIH and NIAID.
There are some concerns of Ecohealth.
Absolutely, and those concerns are shared by both Republicans and Democrats. I think we both share the concerns. I mean, the way the reporting happened, accountability to the public, I think it's all very fair.
Ecohealth Alliance is a U.S.-based nonprofit organization whose mission is to prevent pandemics, but has been most notably known in recent years for its controversial research in collaboration with the Wuhan Institute of Virology that dates back to before the COVID-19 pandemic.
The fact is that, as most people understand it, Ecohealth was absolutely conducting gain-of-function research, specifically in Wuhan, China. Unfortunately, Dr. Daszak's problematic behavior is not limited to his less than fulsome cooperation or the risky research that he conducted. Recently released documents display Dr. Daszak communicating with Dr. David Morens, who was senior advisor to then NIAID director Dr. Fauci, and doing so through private channels to avoid FOIA, Freedom of Information Act.
Emails obtained by the Select Subcommittee suggest that Dr. Peter Daszak might have been misleading the U.S. government as early as 2018 regarding the Ecohealth Alliance's relationship with the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
I truly believe that there were some scientists who were doing things at the Wuhan lab they weren't supposed to. I think that NIAID and Ecohealth were grossly negligent in their oversight of that. As a former criminal defense attorney for many years, I can tell you that if you were my client, I would tell you that dog won't hunt and the judge ain't gonna bite.
Chairman of the Select Subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic, Congressman Wenstrup, issued on Wednesday a report suggesting that Dr. Peter Daszak should be criminally investigated and debarred for allegedly misusing government funds. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
New documents show the cities to which the Biden administration has been flying immigrants in the controversial parole program that skips over the border. This as a new poll shows Americans still believe that immigration is the most critical issue facing the U.S. NTD's Virginia Gibson has more.
In January of last year, the Biden administration expanded an immigration program. It allows migrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela to receive parole and fly directly into the U.S. The Department of Homeland Security never shared where the flights land. Reports previously suggested that Florida might be a key destination. That's despite the fact that the Republican-led state is against uncontrolled immigration. Now, House Republicans have obtained documents through a subpoena. They show where the immigrant flights landed during the first half of 2023. Miami and Fort Lauderdale were leading the list, with over 150,000 arrivals in total. In comparison, New York City is in the third spot, with only around 15,000 arrivals. In total, the program flies immigrants to 50 different cities across the country. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on Tuesday commented on the program, focusing on President Biden.
Not only is he letting people come through the border, he's actually flying in people from places like Haiti under an illegal parole program.
The Biden administration argues the program is a safe and orderly way to bring immigrants into the U.S., avoiding human trafficking and other dangers. Republicans from the House Homeland Security Committee on Wednesday criticized Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas over the program. They said that this violation of the Immigration and Nationality Act is just one reason the House voted to impeach him. Also on Wednesday, committee chairman Mark Green spoke on a panel of the Center for Immigration Studies, discussing the failed Mayorkas impeachment.
The failure to remove him from office from that is an incentive to people to do whatever they want. We just further strengthened the royalty of the executive branch.
This comes as a new Gallup poll shows that 27% of Americans say immigration is the most important problem the U.S. is facing. It's more than any other issue, including the government, the economy, and inflation. The poll did not differentiate between legal and illegal immigration. Virginia Gibson, NTD News.
Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. 6 more states are suing the Biden administration over recent changes made to Title IX. It's the 3rd lawsuit filed this week, as a total of 12 states are now challenging the updates in court. NTD's Jason Blair reports.
Another lawsuit was announced on Tuesday, suing Biden for changes made to Title IX. In a Tuesday press conference, Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Scommette called the Title IX overhaul dangerous and said the Federal Department of Education has no authority to let boys into girls' locker rooms.
This is being done for ideological reasons that I think are so far divorced from the practicalities of why we have these sex-separated spaces.
Scommette said that under the new rules, even questioning somebody's gender identity could constitute illegal sexual harassment.
So if a boy wanders into a girl's locker room, people will feel deterred from challenging that because they could get in trouble just for asking questions. There are people out there who are dangerous people. There are creepy people out there who want to get into these private spaces.
Title IX was drafted in 1972 and was intended to prohibit discrimination in federally funded schools based on sex. The changes made by Biden broaden it to include sexual orientation, gender identity, sex characteristics, and sex stereotypes. Schools that don't cooperate risk losing federal funding.
They're trying to put a gun to the head of the states and say you have to accept our wild-eyed interpretations of what Title IX means or risk losing massive quantities of money.
Tennessee, West Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, and Virginia are the plaintiffs in the case. At the announcement, former NCAA swimmer Riley Gaines advocated for the suit.
Across the country and in various sports, males are entering women's athletic competitions, being given spots on women's teams, and being granted entry into our locker rooms.
Gaines gave a first-hand account of competing against transgender athlete Leah Thomas at the 2022 NCAA National Swimming and Diving Championships.
In addition to losing out on trophies and roster spots and podium spots to Thomas, we also had to share a locker room and change in front of this 6'4", fully intact naked male.
2 other similar lawsuits were filed this week. On Monday, Texas and Louisiana also filed suit challenging Biden's Title IX changes. Also on Monday, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and South Carolina, along with the Independent Women's Forum and 2 other advocacy groups, filed a separate lawsuit over Title IX. Jason Blair, NTD News.
In more sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, a lot to discuss, but let's start in women's soccer, where former USA standout Carli Lloyd shared a major announcement on social media. Tell us about that.
Yeah, she announced that she and her husband are expecting their first child sometime this fall. Now, Lloyd didn't go into great detail about this, but it sounded like this had been quite a struggle with her because she said on the Instagram post, quote, "I know there are other women who are facing challenges in their pregnancy journey. I see you. I understand your pain. My hope is that more and more women will speak up about this topic because their stories helped me. I also wish for more resources, funding, and education around fertility treatments." Now, Lloyd, she retired 3 years ago at age 38 and said right then that she wanted to start a family. So this has really been her plan for quite a while now, I would say.
Moving to NFL news, the Kansas City Chiefs re-signed Travis Kelce for a 2-year extension worth just over $34 million. Where does that rank him among players in the league?
Well, among tight ends, it's number 1 at just over $17 million average salary. Now, he may be known more still for being Taylor Swift's boyfriend, but he's been one of the best tight ends in the league for like a decade now. 9 Pro Bowls, 4 All-Pros. But his rank among all NFL players, though, much lower. Cincinnati's quarterback Joe Burrow topped the list last year, just more than $55 million. That's more than 3 times Kelce's salary for this season. And in fact, the top 15 highest paid players in the league are, of course, all quarterbacks. Now, Kelce, he said he was not going to sit out in order to get this new deal. He and the Chiefs are looking for their 3rd straight Super Bowl title this season.
Now shifting gears to hockey, a pair of NHL teams were eliminated from the playoffs last night as both Winnipeg and the New York Islanders bowed out. What's on the docket for tonight?
We got 2 games. First is Game 5 between the Dallas Stars and the Vegas Golden Knights, who are the defending champs. That series is tied at 2. Now, Vegas is actually going to switch goaltenders tonight, though, bringing in Aiden Hill over Logan Thompson. Thompson started the first 4 games, but they last 2 they lost. However, Hill took over in the playoffs last year. He did very well. They ended up winning the Stanley Cup with him as their main goalie. Now, the second game tonight, you have Game 5 between the Edmonton Oilers and the LA Kings. Edmonton leads that series 3-1. This is the 3rd straight year these 2 teams have met in the playoffs. And Edmonton is just 1 away from winning all 3 of those.
Looking at the NBA playoffs, a pair of teams avoided elimination last night, and Miami will look to do the same tonight against Boston. How's it looking for the Heat?
Yeah, not great. I mean, I give them a lot of credit for getting 1 win. They did that. It took a team playoff record, 23 3-pointers to get that lone win. That was in Game 2. But they did it without Jimmy Butler. And even with Jimmy Butler, they still got the lowest seed in the playoffs. So this isn't really a star-studded team. Now, the other 3 games in the series were all Boston wins, and they really weren't close. Now, tonight, the Celtics will be without the injured Kristaps Porzingis. He's got a calf injury. The game is in Boston. The Celtics have a 37-4 record at home. That's the best mark in the league. After that is Game 5 between the Mavs and Clips. Both teams really might not be at full strength. Kawhi Leonard is out with inflammation in his knee. Meanwhile, Dallas star Luka Doncic, he's going to play for the Mavericks, but he said his knee is, quote, not good. Now, he injured it early in Game 3. He's played pretty much the last 2 games on a bum knee. His shooting has definitely looked off ever since then. This series, though, is tied at 2. Tonight's game is in LA.
Guess we'll have to see then, Dave. As always, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.